Hello, welcome and welcome back to Leaders in Conversation with me, Anni Townend. Today's guest is Howard Johns, CEO of Onezero, founder, entrepreneur, TEDx speaker and author. The title of our conversation is Leading with Energy, Purpose and Hope. Leaders in Conversation is the podcast in which leaders share their personal stories to inspire and encourage you to lead whoever you are, wherever you are, with confidence and courage. They share their personal leadership stories, the people, the places, the experiences that have shaped them and made them who they are today, their values, their beliefs, their passion and their purpose, and how they live and lead connected with these. If you aren't already, please do subscribe and share the podcast. Thank you for listening. Howard offers valuable insights into how trusting your purpose and leading with vision is vital, how leading through success and failure with commitment makes the difference, and how leaning into difficult conversations can create and nurture authentic connection. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you very much, Annie.
I'm really looking forward to stepping into authentic connection with you, Howard. We've known each other for many, many years. We've worked together. We've collaborated together. We've co-led large groups, and we've worked in partnership with some of the teams that you have created and founded as part of your businesses. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your values and beliefs, your passion and purpose, and in particular, how trusting your purpose and finding it and your vision and where that came from.
Well, firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for all the years of support and mentorship and inspiration that you've given me personally. My leadership has been shaped by the conversations we've had over those years and the work we've done together. And I'm really grateful for that. So you are one of the people that has helped shape my leadership. So to put that just there first, really.
Thank you.
What I always know when I'm going to sit and have a conversation with you is that I'm going to touch something that moves me deeply and that uncovers what's really important. And I really value that in all the connections we've had over the years.
Thank you, Howard. In terms of your purpose and finding your purpose and trusting it and leading with that purpose and vision, who else shaped and has informed and made you the leader you are?
You know, it starts from very young in my childhood, really. I always felt a sense of injustice in the world, or a sense that the world could be better, you know, could work in a more harmonious way. You know, my parents, obviously, my father was in the Navy for his whole life, but witnessing his leadership from an early age, you know, was deeply embedded in me. And I was taught, you know, good, authentic leadership by him from a really young age. And I think it's highly unusual and really lucky. And although he led in a very different way, in a very different environment, I think that a lot of the lessons that he shared with me, directly and indirectly, have shaped who I am and how I show up in the world.
And what were some of those lessons that stand out for you as you were growing up and becoming who you are today?
Respecting the people around you is the fundamental. I think my father, you know, and my mother, you know, have done that all their lives, have a huge social connection from it and friends all over the world. And I think that that's, you know, really shaped who I am. So I haven't been daunted to walk into a room full of, you know, prime ministers, or with prime ministers, giving talks to prime ministers, and also a room full of tradespeople or activists. You know, I felt comfortable in all of that, you know. So that's been very much the sort of core of how I've become who I am.
And you've also become a father. It would be interesting for me to know how you are as a father as well, because leadership so often starts at home. And as you've described it, your father and mother were hugely important in shaping who you've become and the ease with which you enjoy being in conversation with people, no matter who they are or where they're from. As a father, what is it that you pass on to your 3 children?
Firstly, being a parent obviously pushes you to every edge, basically. You swing between feeling like a complete failure to feeling really proud of, the children that you see growing up in front of you. And that openness that my parents taught me, that ability to connect with people, whoever they are, that's definitely shared with my children. My own experience that if you have a strong calling, that you can take that and use it as your, the guiding force of your life, basically, that can be the thing that, shapes your next steps and helps guide you in what it is you're trying to do in the world.
And how did you find what you want to do in this world? How did you arrive at your purpose and find your vision?
Yeah, so that sort of deep-seated sense from childhood didn't manifest for many years, but I had that classic moment that many people have of failure, where I didn't get the grades that I was meant to get for the course I wanted to do at university, which was an architectural course. And I found myself with my lovely sister at a university library looking through all the prospectuses going, what is it that I really care about? What am I going to do with my life? Because I had this thing where I had to go to university that year and I had to decide. And what came up was that I was passionate about nature and humanity and nature and how we come more into balance. Then found 2 courses at the time, this was the early 90s, in the country that did something on energy and engineering, and phoned them both up and had a place within days. That was a real pivotal moment that I have to thank my sister for, where I've spent my whole life working on energy. That moment of failure shaped my whole life. And I'm unusual in that I've spent my whole life working on something I actually studied.
And that you found in response to the question, what do you really care about?
Yeah.
And you've become a passionate solar energy entrepreneur and founded a number of businesses, been part of a number of businesses. Tell us more about the experience of success and failure in those, and what has kept you going.
The first thing that happened was that I became completely maddened by what was going on in the world, not just that feeling of slight discomfort, but, I had a rage about the fact that we were destroying our home. So firstly, that translated into activism. And so what I first did was climb trees and was evicted from trees, trying to stop coal mines being dug and that sort of stuff. With my now wife for a couple of years, living out of a truck, what became apparent was that you can't solve the problems by saying no. You have to build solutions. So the first companies were born out of that. If we want to make the change in the world, we have to build the change. So that's what I've spent my whole life trying to do. And all of the companies, in fact, now it's 10 companies I've been involved with, either founded, led. All of those companies have been an expression of that, of, how do we make this accessible? How do we create the world we want to see, the one that's in balance with nature, that isn't extracting fossil fuels and burning them to live our lives? There is a different way. We know it's possible. And I guess what's been amazing is to witness the transformation over this last 20 years. Now, some days solar reaching 25% of the UK's energy needs. So it's been an amazing journey, and I've ridden this incredible wave, the solar coaster we call it, because it's full of ups and downs and twists and turns and uncomfortable bits and exciting bits. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. But I think through all of this, I've had this vision I've been carrying, and I still haven't managed to manifest it, So I'm yet again having another go. A year and a half ago, sort of quit my CEO role, running a huge portfolio of large-scale solar and wind projects across Europe for a stock market listed investment fund, to go back to the start, to go back to trying to lead for the vision I want to see in the world, which is a world which empowers the individuals running our lives on light.
It's very exciting, Howard, following your journey and having conversations with you from time to time, and this conversation being one of those. You inspire me with your commitment to the vision you have of making the world a better place, and that we can, and that you bring a hope to that, when for many of us it can seem really difficult and very hard to sustain that hope, particularly through success and failure, and your commitment to keep going. How do you do that? how do you find your own energy to fuel your vision and your purpose?
I've done a lot of deep work over the years, and I'm particularly grateful also for my work with Indigenous communities. So I've done a lot of shamanic ceremonies over the years. I found that the biggest barrier, and again, this is something you've helped me to realize, that, you know, the biggest barrier to leadership is generally us. If you look at what blocks most organizations from succeeding, it's the people at the top. And I've been very, very aware of that for myself. The bundle of goodness and pain that I walk with, and how that limits my ability to manifest and to show up in the world. So I found myself, luckily for this last 12 years now, working with an Indigenous community. For me, going back and doing ceremony with those elders, you know, like once a quarter, that's how I recharge, you know, that's how I reset myself. And having connections like this, these deep conversations, you know, having mentors that I can call on that help me to reset when I'm in difficult places, you know, I'm really grateful for that. You do a really deep dive on who I am, where I am, what's really working, what isn't working, and then come up with a plan as to how I need to move forwards. You know, I feel like those sorts of conversations, the sorts of conversations we're having now, they're really invaluable to me. And, you know, so that deep sort of spiritual work, you know, to really reconnect with who I am and the fact that my life's a gift. You know, I've been put here for some reason, and, you know, there's many things that get thrown in the way. You know, there's been many moments, you know, particularly in this last year, where I felt like, what on earth am I doing? You know, why on earth am I putting myself through this uncomfortable, difficult stuff to try and create something that many people don't even believe is possible, you know? Drawing on that deep well of connection and prayer, and feeling that, you know, there's many ways to live. You know, so sitting with those Indigenous elders particularly, you know, their worldview's so different that even just to be with them, you realize that the problems we have and the things that we're facing in this society at this moment, there is a way to live. It's been modeled for millennia by people. So being with them and just, you know, feeling that, you know, that it is possible. You know, it's possible to live in a different way. That's what refreshes me and enables me to show up and to sweat through the hard times.
And gives you that energy, reconnects you with your
Exactly.
purpose, and gives you hope, and reconnects you to the fact that you want to make the world a better place. And that sometimes involves us having uncomfortable conversations, which can lead to not only, I think, an authentic connection with ourselves, but with each other, which is something I know that's important to you, is that authentic connection with our own nature, with each other, but also in community. How do you do that?
I'm always drawn to the bits that feel uncomfortable, you know, because often that's where the biggest opportunity lies. So, you know, in leading businesses, I've often looked for the bits where, you know, people want to push it to the side, or they don't want to hear from that person, or they won't really have the honest conversation because it's easier just to squash it or push it away. But to me, that's such a wasted opportunity, in that, you know, often the person in the team that's asking the hard, or that's not even asking the hard question, that's just in some way obstructing the flow, often in that there's this wasted energy that needs to be unlocked. So for me, I'm often drawn to those bits, you know, because it feels like, wow, if we can unleash that, then we can really move something, you know. So I've always tried to lead in a way that brings people with me, you know, that it sort of doesn't matter where you are, but hopefully we as a team can meet you and find where you can feel valued, where you can feel like you can show up with who you are. That's what I try and do, is to inspire that in all the people around me, and also to really gently confront. And I think, you know, I know that, you know, I think of some of the conversations I've had with people and how distressing it's been for them to be challenged, you know, that actually it's really uncomfortable for many people to be honest. But actually, if you can get past that discomfort, you can really build something strong. You know, so that's what I try to do in my leadership and in the world.
I think you do it very well. And I think it takes courage to do that, to focus on those things that get pushed to the edges, that you're then shining a light on and saying to people, gently confronting them as you describe it, to have a look at those things. Let's talk about those things. Let's see what is possible, all the time with the vision of, through talking about this, we can make it better. We can make it better for each other. We can make it better for everybody.
I think asking people, what is it that they really want to bring to the world? Particularly in bigger organizations, people arrive and they feel like they've got to fit in, and they've got to somehow slot themselves in as some sort of cog in this machine that they're now part of. And actually, I always think of it the other way. Imagine if you could create an upwelling of enthusiasm and of passion in all the teams around you. And maybe that doesn't mean that they're going to sit in that seat for very long, but they're going to lead in some other area. And that's what I'm always looking for, is how do you get people to step into their own leadership so that they can just strengthen? We're all leaders, and we've not maybe been schooled in the fact that we're all leaders, so we're inherently disempowered. But actually, if we could really empower the people that we're working with to lead for what they believe in, if we can really encourage those around us to lead, suddenly we've got something strong. We, as the leader, have to work a lot less hard, really, to achieve our vision in the world. So that's what I've always tried to do, with varying levels of success, of course.
I love that upwelling of leadership, because, as I said in the introduction, this podcast is all about helping people to feel more confident and courageous in their leadership, whoever they are, wherever they're from, whether they have a leadership role. We're all leaders, and that upwelling of leadership and of taking responsibility, sharing responsibility with each other is so important. I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, I think people need to get past this notion that leadership is some top-down thing. Leadership is within everything. The person who's, confronted with the problem that goes and solves it, that's leadership.
And you made that switch. You were describing how you started out as an activist and were up a tree for a couple of years, and then you wanted to become part of the solution, and you've dedicated your life and leadership to being part of that solution and creating that solution with others through conversation, but also through installation of solar solutions and inspiring energy, passion and hope in other people.
Most weeks I'm out talking to communities. There's this huge opportunity happening right now. We've been through this sort of digitization of many things. And in some ways there's a parallel going on in energy, in that you used to have centralized knowledge banks. You have centralized power stations, but suddenly that's totally changed. We've got distributed renewables all over the country. And, with digitization comes this huge opportunity for democratization. And most people don't understand that that's what's going on in energy. It's happened already dramatically in this last 2 decades. But there's this huge leap happening right now. And that's what I'm leading for at the moment, is to try and engage thousands of people across the UK and across Europe stepping into this new form of distributed energy, where you are all part of the energy system. Instead of just being the home at the end that just pays the bill, you can now generate and store energy on your home. And you can flex when you take energy to work with the grid so that you can optimize the price you pay for power, but you can also help to balance this big intermittent energy system. So what I'm trying to create at the moment is an energy company that starts with homes. So it's like, we're going to build a power station across thousands of homes, and then we're going to link them all together digitally and flex them to bring in the lowest carbon, cheapest energy that we can, and also support the grid in times when there's low generation. And it's going to be a new sea of activated individuals basically rewriting the energy system. Most of us can generate probably 60 to 70% of the energy we need, like heating and electricity, on our homes. It's totally possible now, but most people don't realise. And there's a whole bunch of barriers to them doing that, both financial, understanding, who's going to do it, all those bits. So we're trying to break that down. It's a hard thing to do, but it started. And that's all you can do really, is just take the next step. Having a vision is an amazing thing because you've got this thing to go after for your life. But it's also a huge burden, because I have this vision well, someone said to me once, it's like you've got a vision that's 10 years ahead of where you are generally. So that's hard.
Yeah.
Because you never feel like you've achieved what you want to achieve. So there's that balance of, holding a vision and then the commitment. 10 years ago, I had to close a company I'd spent 12 years or even 14 years building and nurturing, that I was really proud of. And I decided to do it really publicly. I actually went on Channel 4 News to talk about it, having to then go through that. It's a really challenging thing to do, because inevitably, when you're carrying a vision, your whole identity becomes wrapped up in that vision. Who you are and what your worth is in the world all becomes wrapped in it. And so when you do fail, you have these existential crises. When I was pulled out of that tree and I realized that pathway wasn't really going to create the change I wanted to see in the world, you have this existential crisis of like, well, who am I? What is it that I'm here for? Why am I doing these things? What is it I'm leading for? And what can I do now that will be useful, and that will make my heart sing? I think having having some practice, having some deeper calling is really important. It's all right to fail, and it's all right to just try again and to keep showing up, because we talked about like hope at the start of this, and in many ways we live in such a stark time with, stark divides politically, really horrible stuff going on in the world. Climate, we are in a changed climate. We're at 1.5 degrees, which is so impactful for so many people. There are people dying all over the world every week. Every week there's an intense climate event, climate-related storms. The climate has changed. Society will never be the same again. We're in a very fragile time, in many ways. I still feel the opportunity for recreation of our society. In some ways we have to come to the brink to really feel how fragile we are. And from that is where we'll create this new society that hopefully, is in balance with nature and brings people into deeper connection with themselves. Because that's the opportunity, is to step back into connection with the natural world. If you run your house on sun and wind, or sun and nature, it links you back in. If we run our society on light, it totally changes everything. And that's what this next 2 decades is. That's what we're going to manifest. We have to. We don't have an option. But what that does is take away from this dark, extractive society that we've built at the moment, which is sucking from us. It's taking our souls on some level, on a deep level. But that's the opportunity of this moment. And I do feel like there's so many tailwinds behind us that we can't really see for us to succeed on this endeavor. I think they're stronger than they've ever been. And in 20 years' time, when we've made this change, people will go, well, of course that's what was happening. So for me, I am more hopeful than I've ever been.
Thank you, Howard. I feel more hopeful listening to you sharing your vision and your passion, your purpose, and it gives me hope. So thank you. And I'm sure it's giving listeners and other leaders, all of us, more hope to ask the questions, what do you really care about? What is your contribution? And how can we all be part of the solution to the situation that we're in? And as we come to the end of our conversation, I would like you to highlight your 3 key encouragements to leaders and to listeners in terms of how they can lead with energy, purpose, and hope.
The first one is to be bold. I would encourage people, wherever you are, whether you're a leader or whether you're, a leader of a business, let's say, or whether you're someone who feels like they're in a small role, if you can see something that needs to change, speak up, be bold, stand up for what you believe, because often people in the leadership roles can't see that. And you're going to empower them by standing up for what you believe in and saying what you see. Often that's the most important thing you can do. For those in leadership, just my experience has been that the more honest and the more humility you can show up with in your leadership, the more likely you are for people to support you and to come around you and to turbocharge your efforts. The last bit is around the bigger picture, the meta-narrative, and again, when I talk to communities at the moment, that's what I'm talking to them about, is this is what's going on. There's this big change we're part of. And I think the more you can help people to connect to their purpose within that big change, the more you can help them to engage with their part in this story that you're part of, the easier it is for them to become passionate, for them to be empowered, for them to really lead, and for you as a team then to be more effective. So, talk to them about the big vision and then bring it back to the challenge we're facing right now. This is the problem we've got right in front of us. And, who's got any ideas? Who feels the fire to go and tackle that? Because someone probably does. And if you can draw that out, you're going to be better for it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Howard. One final question from me to you is, as a result of our conversation today, who is the person or the people that you're going to be next having a conversation with? And what's the conversation going to be about?
Well, it's probably time for me to do a bit of deep diving. So I've been meaning to get in touch with one of my mentors and have a proper unpack of who I am and where I'm going and whether I'm on the right path and that sort of stuff. So I think leaving this, I need to go and make that happen.
Another good encouragement to us all, to have someone with whom we can do that, to take that deep dive within, in order that we can then look out, look up, and connect with our vision and that of each other and with each other. Thank you, Howard. Thank you so much for being in conversation with me today, for sharing your wisdom and your insights and your stories. Thank you to Brown Bear Studios for recording us in the studio. We're the first people to be properly recorded in the studio today. And thank you to Schmogus Media for the production and marketing of the podcast. Thank you to you, the listener, for listening. Please do share the episode. And for those of you wishing to connect with Howard, to read his book, Energy Revolution, how should people do that?
To find me on LinkedIn or Onezero.energy is the company I'm working on. So look us up and help us get going in your area.
And Thanks. Read the book.
Thanks so much for having me, Annie. It's always so lovely to have a deep conversation with you.
It's been a joy being in conversation with you. If you would like to listen to more Leaders in Conversation with me, Anni Townend, do go to my website. Do get in touch with me via LinkedIn, Anni Townend. And please email me if you'd like to have a conversation, Anni@annitownend.com. Thank you for listening. I look forward to hearing from you.